So I called the lactation consultant, and she was like, wait, what? She's like, the only other person I know that's produced this much milk had depression during her pregnancy too. And she actually had a brain tumor. And I was like, oh, fuck. Because what I was thinking at that point was, oh my God, like, this is going to be cancer. Like, I'm screwed. Hello. It should be an interesting experience, I think, for people to listen in to my life and my thoughts, because, for the people who are around me a lot, they know a lot of what's happened to me. But I think for the outside people who look at my life and maybe think things are all gravy, that's not the case. We all have things we deal with. And pregnancy and postpartum for me was probably one of the most difficult times in my life. But also, I would say now out of the situation, and in recovery, like, it's been a time of enlightenment and an ability to see who people are, and also to see the ability and inability for people really to understand mental illness, to understand what it's like to care for people who are sick. And I think it's just taught me a lot about people in general, a lot about myself as a mother. And I was at lunch today and my friend had asked me, what has it been like for you to experience motherhood, and how has that impacted you? And it's so many things that I could say, but I guess I really had to sit and ponder in that question and really think about, like, over this entire period of time, like, what has this taught me? And it's so many things. And I think I'll share with you guys as we go through some of the really great lessons, hard lessons that I've had to learn. So anyways, I guess we'll start with my husband and I, because I always ask people, how did you guys meet? And now it's my turn to put my relationship on blast. Me and my husband met on an app, and he's 9 years older than me. And everyone around me is not surprised by that, because people who really know me always have said, like, you'll probably marry someone much older than you. And I think even my counselor says it, and I think I've had the same counselor since I was 21, and he's been saying that forever. And I think it's because I always just, I guess, matured maybe a little faster, and for some reason the people around me thought, okay, well, it's probably better for her to be with someone a lot older than her. I had gone on a date with him. I mean, it's no surprise to me that he picked the place closest to, like, where he was getting his suit tailored. Guys on these apps are always trying to, like, make things convenient for them. Whoever's, like, listening on dating apps will, like, totally get a kick out of that, I'm sure. So, yeah, we hated each other. I could not stand him. I mean, I think the thing that I've realized about the both of us is we're extremely direct. I'm probably one of the most blunt people you're ever going to meet. Like, if you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think. Some people like it and some people hate it. And yeah, I just did not like him. I mean, I thought that not only was he just like, we didn't agree on a lot of things, but also I just was like, this guy's an asshole. And what I've realized, like, now knowing my husband, is that he doesn't really put on for people at all. Like, he is who he is. Like, I'm someone who comes in and is, like, asking people a lot of questions about their life and wanting to really know about them and what they're like and what they do and what their relationship is like and why they like that person. And, I ask a ton of questions, and he just, like, doesn't care. Like, he doesn't put on for people. He is who he is. And I really respect that now, because he just is a very direct person who is, like, not putting on for anybody. I mean, that's the perfect way. And I think now, knowing him before, like, obviously I told him to go fuck off, like, after our first date. And then we ended up reconnecting, like, right in the beginning of COVID, like the start of that. We, like, went on a hike and just started hanging out all the time. By the end of that year, I had gotten pregnant by mistake. And quite honestly, I was panicking. Actually, well, I didn't find out I was pregnant until I was probably like 5 weeks pregnant. And then I kept it a secret for like 2 more weeks, because I was like, how am I going to tell him this? And the thing about it is, like, he didn't really care if I was pregnant or not. Him and I had already talked about getting engaged like a few months in, which I was like, there's no way I'm going to be, like, engaged to someone after 3 months of dating. Like, we need to go and experience some things. And so I think David had had my ring for like months at that point, and he actually proposed like days after I ended up telling him I was pregnant, which is super funny because everything was already planned. For me personally, I was like, it's probably like important for me to be engaged, living with someone. I didn't want to live with someone again, not engaged, because I had done that personally for myself, and I didn't like how the dynamic played out the first time. I didn't really feel like there was an urgency for like that person to marry me. Kind of was just like I was there. But what I've realized now, looking back and being more mature about the situation, is like living with that person or not didn't impact how they felt about me. I think that they either knew they wanted to marry me or they didn't. And like being with someone who was so sure, my husband currently, that he wanted to be with me, like it just shows like who's for you will be for you. Like you don't need to convince anybody to marry you. You don't need to give ultimatums, in my opinion. I think the person who wants to marry you will just marry you. Like they're going to be dying to be with you. And I felt like David was always so sure about him and I really love that because I was so sure, right? And it was just like a simple decision for me. And so you throw on a pregnancy on top of that, that's fine. Like it doesn't even faze us. I think I was probably a little bit more nervous with just like how I was raised, like, you know, wanting to be married before I had a kid, but it doesn't matter. Whatever. I mean, this is 2022. Anyways, so I got pregnant. We were engaged at that point. I think I moved in to his house like, I don't know, a month or two later. And, you know, I guess like this is where the story started with my pregnancy. My pregnancy started off pretty smooth. Like, yeah, I had morning sickness, but I think that was pretty typical of like everybody else. I mean, a lot of people have morning sickness. But like morning sickness obviously isn't morning sickness. It's like pretty much all day sickness. And, you know, I was extremely sick. I mean, all fucking day. Like it was crazy. I didn't realize like you can feel like you have the worst hangover of your life and also feel like you're on a boat sick together. I mean, it was insane. And I didn't realize this lasts like 10 weeks. I mean, this is like the flu on crack. I never threw up, but I was just really, really sick. And that alone is debilitating because like you're working while you're doing all this. And I've always been really obsessed with work and just that independence. So I just remember like getting super sick. Obviously I told I was pregnant, but I literally stayed over there and just like sat around at the fire because I was pregnant during winter and just like laid there. I remember he had gone on a ski trip and came home and I literally couldn't move. Like I was so fucking sick. And you don't want to tell people you're pregnant. Well, some people do, which I applaud. I really do. But like for me, I didn't want to tell anybody I was pregnant till I was 20 weeks or more because I wanted to get through that anatomy scan because I just didn't know, you know, for myself. I felt that way. I guess, you know, I look back on a lot of symptoms, you know, after being diagnosed, you know, months and months and months and months later, finally. But I had optic issues in college. And I think that's first where my signs were showing of what eventually was diagnosed as a prolactinoma, which is a benign brain tumor on your pituitary gland. So I was having a lot of issues with just like dizziness during college. Like I would be sitting there and kind of like the room would go black, like randomly, and then it would kind of turn back on. And it had been going on for years, and I felt like it was getting worse and worse as I was getting older. And I had gone to my OB and said, you know, like something's up. So this was maybe like a few years before I gotten pregnant. And they were like, oh, well, maybe you're just like eating too much during the day and your sugar's kind of spiking. Because I had had a cardiologist look at it, and there was really nothing that had gone on. So, you know, I kind of just excuse it as like the doctors are probably right. Like maybe I'm just like eating too many carbs during the day. But, you know, something about myself is I work out 6 days a week. I'm running all the time. I obviously cared a lot and still do care a lot about my body and taking care of it. So looking back now, I probably should have said like something isn't right. And so let's get into the pregnancy. So, you know, I told you guys I was super sick, and probably about month 3, maybe I was about like 15 weeks. David and I had gone skiing, and I had cleared it with my new OB because I had gone to a new OB because I was delivering, obviously, a baby this time. So I wanted to get someone who worked at a high-level NICU hospital. So about month 3, we had gone skiing, got that cleared. I was fine. And, I was on the ski lift. And I told my girlfriend this story today, actually, at lunch. I said, I was on the ski lift, and I thought, if I just jump off this ski lift, I think I'll feel way better. And I shared it with my husband when we had gotten back to the room, and he was like, you need a psychiatrist, this isn't okay. And I think what had happened is a few weeks before I had noticed anxiety. I had gone out in the garage and I was like, oh my God, what if something happens to the baby? What if I fall? What if I was thinking about all these crazy scenarios, and I kind of excused it as I'm just pregnant, everybody has anxiety. And I was listening to this podcast where these women were talking about being anxious, and I was, just ruminating on things a lot. And I noticed I was crying a lot too. I would just go to the room and just cry like crazy. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm going to do. And really there was nothing to be overwhelmed at, now looking back at the situation. And so I just noticed that I think anxiety had gone to depression within 2 weeks. And it's so weird having depression when you're not a depressed person normally. Going through that, and I think women listening go through postpartum. And the reason why I think it's so important for me to really tell the nitty gritty of this is because if someone's listening and feeling that way, you need to get help. Don't excuse the fact that just because you're a new mom or because you're suffering, it's okay to suffer alone, or it's okay to have these thoughts and they're going to pass. Because the reality is we do need help. The stigma, this needs to stop existing where we feel like someone's going to take our baby or someone is going to put us in a mental ward because we're depressed and dealing with all these hormones. And so I finally had found a psychiatrist who focused just on maternity. So just babies and people delivering or postpartum and managing that care. But what I noticed, I think looking back now, is most people have postpartum depression. Most people don't get sporadic, random depression during their pregnancy unless they probably had a history of that. And, even my psychiatrist had said, well, usually we see people with a history of anxiety come in who sometimes get full-blown depression during pregnancy, or their depression just gets unmanageable because of the hormones, especially postpartum. I guess what's just so crazy about depression is it just consumes your thoughts. Now being back to normal and off of Zoloft, because I was on Zoloft my entire pregnancy, and it was titrated up and then titrated down right before my delivery a little bit, and then back up postpartum, is depression's all consuming. And I'm really understanding why suicide is so high in people with depression, because it's a hole you can't escape. And your medication is if it's being managed right, changing that dose can really, really fuck with you and cause you to go into a downward spiral. Or these hormones changing can really cause you to go into a downward spiral. And I just think it's so, so important that the stigma be gone with it, because it really is an illness. It's something that's just all consuming. And I think I found myself really sympathizing and empathizing with people who had that. And I think this is where a lot of the lessons came in about my life, things that I was supposed to, I feel really learn. Because I had always I've always volunteered for hospice. It's always something I talk about at work. I talk about it with people. I talk about it a lot because I think it's taught me some of the most valuable lessons about who we are as humans, our exploration, empathizing and understanding people are dealing with a lot of stuff that you really have no idea about. And words, actions, things do matter. It's important to apologize for things. It's important to move forward. It's important to be real and upfront with people. And I think that's what it's taught me. It's turned me into a very blunt person, because I feel it's just important to put things on the table. I think I've always had an ability to empathize very well with people because I've been around, people in their last days for years and years and years and years, and understand like people have a lot of stuff going on. But I think going through a situation like that, I was told a lot by my psychiatrist, like, you need to keep your stress really, really low. Like, you got to go to work and you got to come home and you need to chill. And you need people around you, because at that point, you know, they were trying to manage my depression. And I was also dealing with a lot of other symptoms because of this brain tumor that was later diagnosed. Like, I was dizzy. I had fallen down the stairs. I remember at like 6 months pregnant. I was going to rent my condo, and I was going downstairs after I'd showed it, and I fell down like 6 stairs and fell into like a planter, and I was panicking. I remember David had gone out to go wine tasting with some of his friends, and like I was panicked because I'm like, oh my God, I'm literally going to lose this baby after like all this hell I've gone through to like just try and keep myself together until I delivered. Like, this is going to be a disaster. And so I was just dealing with a lot. I really had to prioritize myself at the time. And I think it's been best for me, like going through that situation and seeing how people reacted, thinking that it was about them when it was really about myself, really taught me that I am the most important person, and my husband and my child is. Prioritizing that and prioritizing our family is the most important thing at the end of the day. And I'll still take those values that I learned, those lessons that I learned, to life now itself. And I still continuously have to remind my friends of that lesson. Like, put yourself first and put your family first, always, even if it pisses people off, because it will. And so as I continued through my pregnancy, I think my depression got enough muted that I kind of could move forward. And, you know, I remember going in to Starbucks one day, and this woman turned around, and I've always really felt like spiritually people always carry energy with them, and I've always been someone who's very in tune with people's energy and really can pick up things a lot. And this woman turns around and said, you know, I feel like I just really need to pray for you. Like, there's just such a dark feeling over you. Like, I feel like you're depressed. And, you know, I will never forget that moment, because I think it was really a turning point for me to say, like I'm in such a dark place. Like, people are feeling that. Like, I'm carrying that energy with me. And it's really scary, I think, when you look back, carrying a baby and a life inside of you and dealing with all of that and trying to manage just like making sure you get your child here safe and really not knowing what's wrong with you. I think, you know, that's what the scariest part is. Like, I really didn't understand, I think, the magnitude of how much stuff was to come. And so she prayed for me, and I really, really will always appreciate that woman for what she did, because it was just like a moment in my life that I think I really needed. And it's just sad. You know, I went through a lot trying to get to that delivery, and I dealt with a lot, and it was just a really dark time in my life. Like, I look back and I'm like, oh my God, for my marriage itself, it was dark because we were trying to deal with my mental illness, and we really didn't know what was wrong with me. And, you know, my husband couldn't go a lot of places either. Like, I had to constantly have someone around me, because obviously I was dealing with so much emotionally, and like trying to find the right medication and find, I guess, like some kind of just like dullness, like some kind of mute of those voices of just like feeling like shit, like my life wasn't worth anything, and that, you know, it was better off for me and the baby not to be here. But I almost was optimistic, because I think that I thought delivering that baby was going to like relieve the depression. I knew that I could have a jump off of the hormones, because that's pretty normal from when you give birth. Like, a lot of people suffer from postpartum. So, you know, my psychiatrist was very proactive in knowing, like, as soon as I delivered, she bumped my dose way up to 100 and something. Delivered the baby came out in like 2 pushes, no tears. I got really lucky, thank God, because I hear horror stories about people like ripping to their buttholes. So the baby came out, and oh my God, like, it's so crazy becoming a parent because like you think you're going to feel super attached to the baby. And I was like, who the hell is this? Like, I was like, who is this person? Like, this is some random person that just came out of my body. But like soon you just become so attached to this person. Like, you know, I just think about him like as really a testament to my strength. And I don't want to cry on here, but like, I just feel so strong. Every time I look at him, I say like, we made it. Like there was so many times, like I really didn't think I was going to make it through that pregnancy. And like women are so strong. Like that's just like another thing I've learned. I just look at women and I see them as like so amazing. Like not only their ability to have children or even their ability, just these people like dealing with so much to try and have kids. Like we're just so strong. We are so amazing. And so I look at battling depression as like one of the hardest times in my life, and it has truly strengthened so many of my friendships. Just people like close friends that I have stepping in really to take care of me and just check in on me. I see mothers as just like, you guys are amazing. We go through at times a lot to have our kids or raise these kids, and I just have such a profound amount of respect for them. It's just the friendships I think I'll be forever grateful for is going through something like that. And I think seeing other people, even though they're going through their own stuff, really rally to like take care of me. And so I just really have some amazing, amazing women around me. Friends who don't have kids and friends who do. And yeah, just women are amazing. Anyways, after crying for like a good 5 minutes on here. So the story really, I think, took a great turn in a lot of ways because I got a diagnosis. And what that came from is from my lactation consultant of all people. And it was just really a surprising diagnosis because my milk came in and it really had to align, like everything had to align perfectly because my milk came in and my milk was really just out of control. I was producing probably about 15 ounces of milk every 3 hours. I was just really like, my boobs were huge. Like, I think my tits were like Z's at that point. Like, they were so big. I remember calling my cousin and asking her like, hey, I keep getting mastitis repeatedly, and mastitis makes you super sick. Like, it's like a flu. I mean, and you're treated with antibiotics. And so I had called my doctor and I had kept getting, antibiotics. And my cousin said, you probably should call a lactation consultant. And so I called the lactation consultant and she was like, wait, what? She's like, the only other person I know that's produced this much milk had depression during her pregnancy too. And she actually had a brain tumor. And I was like, oh, fuck. Because what I was thinking at that point was, oh my God, like this is going to be cancer. Like I'm screwed. So anyways, it just was crazy at that point because I had gone in for blood work. I had to call my OB, demand an MRI, demand blood work, which they totally did. My MRI, the first one, came back completely clear, my brain MRI. My blood work was sky high with my prolactin. My prolactin was in the 400s, and it was supposed to be like maybe in the 30s or 40s from now, like what my neurosurgeon is telling me and neuroendocrinologists are telling me. And so I just still felt like something was off. Like, although my MRI was clear, like I still felt sketched out. And so keep in mind, I have like a 3-month-old. Like, I immediately had stopped breastfeeding which like then was such a good decision. No, I think I had like a 6-week-old or 7-week-old because I had stopped breastfeeding at 2 months. I stopped breastfeeding. I was weaning off, and people listening, like weaning is really hard. Like you continue to get mastitis at times because your milk doesn't just stop. Like when you're stopping breastfeeding a month in, like your body is taught to keep feeding that baby. And so I had to be extremely careful just with how I was weaning, my milk. And obviously I'm recovering from having a baby and thinking about like, okay, I'm still dizzy. I'm still on Zoloft. I'm trying to wean breastfeeding. I still have depression. Like I still feel like shit. And so my MRI was clear, and I had just happened to run into this girl at my son's pediatrician appointment who was talking about the fact that she had no hair and how she had had a prolactinoma. And she had gone to this guy in this practice, I'm not going to say his name, and he had to run a specific MRI for her to find the tumor because of how the tumor set. So I said, oh, perfect. I'm going to get this guy's name. And I'm in healthcare, so I know how to navigate it. So I called my doctor, my primary care, and I said, I need a referral over to this hospital to see this person, like send the referral. And sure enough, they said, okay, go ahead. And at that point, I had stopped breastfeeding by the time, because this was like, my son was like 5 months old. Anyway, so they ran an MRI, and they found the tumor. And they only found the tumor because the neuroendocrinologist, who was a brain hormone guy, had ran the MRI with a contrast, and how they ran the contrast was different because when they ran the contrast, they ran it in a specific pattern, so it was able to find microadenomas, which are small tumors in the brain. And sure enough, that thing lit up. It was 4 millimeters, super small, and I forget exactly where it was at, but I know it was beside the cavernous sinus, which is some kind of sinus. And I knew that I finally had found out what was wrong with me. And at that point, I think, as time obviously went on, my son was like 7 months old at that point. I was like, yes, like I have finally figured out what's wrong with me. And my Zoloft was down to 25 milligrams because basically what was happening was, now knowing after my neuroendocrinologist explained it, is like during pregnancy, well, before pregnancy, I probably had a very small tumor. So maybe it was 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters. And when you get pregnant, estrogen feeds those tumors. So my pituitary tumor had gotten probably really big, maybe 8 millimeters. And keep in mind, your pituitary gland is like super small. Anyways, after I had stopped breastfeeding, it probably went down, but it was still secreting. But my prolactin, they think, was probably in the 500-600s during pregnancy because the estrogen was feeding the tumor and the tumor just was bigger. And what they know now is that mood disorders can be a side effect of those tumors. So can dizziness, so can fainting, so can excessive breast milk. And sometimes people have the breast milk and don't even have babies. So the reason they find out that they have these tumors is because they're leaking milk and they're actually not even pregnant. And I think it's God's way really of protecting us because, as you all can, have listened, I got so sick because I still had that tumor, and most people can't get pregnant and are producing milk because their prolactin is up, and prolactin is a milk-producing hormone. And so it's kind of like simulating like they're pregnant, which is why they can't get pregnant. And so they get these tumors removed, and then they try to have their kids. So they're kind of like symptom-free during pregnancy. So that's the gist of it. Like, I had finally found out what was wrong with me. I had decided immediately that I wanted to get it removed. Just because I think, number one, I didn't know if I wanted to have more kids. And number two, and if I did, I knew I would probably get sick again. Well, I was going to get sick again for sure with that depression that was brought on by the prolactin being so high. And so, it was a really easy decision for me, I guess, to get the prolactinoma taken out. They were going to go up through my nose and get to my pituitary gland. But the way that my tumor was sitting, it was very close to the cavernous sinus. And so I had a risk of getting double vision if they had to go in there, if it was sticking enough to it to where they had to like dig into there to get it. There's just like a lot of stuff. Like it's kind of resetting your hormones, so you're extremely tired after surgery. There was just a lot of things that could happen based on them going into your brain that way. And it's just extremely scary. Like I remember having to go in for my surgery that morning, and my husband couldn't come with me. And, you know, I had just been through so much. Like I had looked back on the situation and thought like, I just have been through like literally hell to have this kid. I literally couldn't do anything. Like I was so stressed out and so nervous because I'm like, if something happens to me, my husband's going to be by himself with this baby. You know, I just was coping and dealing with a lot. And I think I was just really let down also because, you know, for people who are really around me, you know, like close to me, like I'll do anything for you. I'll get on the plane in the middle of the night. I'll send you money for this. I'll come with you if you need help with anything. Like that's just my nature. It's just who I am for people who are closest to me. And so I think I was just really let down of understanding like most people don't have the innate feeling to take care of other people necessarily when they're sick, and that's just okay. Like they don't always meet you where you're at. And I guess that was just a really big pain point for me, and I think I reacted just very disappointed and annoyed and angry because I just expected more. And, you know, it is what it is. But I thank God for, you know, my husband, my family, you know, my blood. Like, they were there. Like, I look at, you know, my sisters flying out across the country to take care of me and my child. Like, you know, I didn't see my son for 7 days after surgery or 8 days. I saw him briefly, obviously, but like, you know, after surgery, I was so sick. Like those headaches were crazy. Like it wasn't even a headache. It was like an uncontrollable, like just your head is just pounding. And I was walking around in sunglasses probably for weeks. I remember going in the grocery store and I would get sick from like, and nauseous from the noise. I would get disoriented where I'd have to just go home. I remember this guy had gotten out of the car because I had parked wrong one morning and was like yelling at me to learn how to park, and I had stopped him, and I was like, dude, like I just had brain surgery. Like I just had a baby. Like I'm dealing with so much stuff. Like my parking is the least of my worries. And he still kept cussing me out about like how I had parked wrong. And, you know, I just said whatever. Like I just learned just to care a lot less just about like outside stuff because there's just so many more bigger fish to fry, and like people just don't get it. But there were just a lot of side effects of that surgery, like that were really crazy. And I remember also I had lost a ton of weight from that tumor. Like some people gain weight. I had lost a ton. I remember I was like 116 pounds. I had lost like all the baby weight and more. I had lost all my muscle. I had started pregnant like maybe 130 with muscle. I ended at like 144 and I was down to 116 pounds. So I was like trying to gain weight too and eat while I was recovering. But, you know, now being out of the situation and like feeling so good in a sense of my mental state. Like I remember waking up and like immediately that depression was like lifted. And I just stopped taking my medication. I think I was on 25 milligrams, and the psychiatrist said, you know, I think it's time just to stop. Like, let's just see what happens. And I just like, I'm so happy I did that surgery because it immediately got rid of my anxiety. Like my prolactin had dropped down to 7 immediately after surgery. And I look back and I'm like, I had a prolactin one point over 400. So it just shows you how crazy that tumor was and like how much it was messing with my other hormones. It was just a really crazy time, like to look back on that situation and see like what your brain has the power to do. Like one hormone being off, like growing that tumor and not even knowing that I had it, like how much it had affected my weight, the pregnancy, the dizziness, the fainting, the optic issues I was having. I mean, it was so many things, my milk production, you know, being on those antidepressants, having to be on them to, you know, sustain that pregnancy and postpartum, like it was just a crazy, crazy time. But the recovery is still going on because I'm still extremely tired easy. I'm super lethargic, and very sleepy still. But, you know, I have my mental state and I have my family, and I am just just so grateful, like, for my health. Like, your health is something that can be taken at any time. Like, we have no idea what's growing inside of our bodies at any time. And to think that I had a brain tumor is like crazy because I eat healthy. I'm a vegetarian for the most part. I work out 6 days a week. Me and my husband are very big into health. And I try and, you know, instill that into my child now, just eating healthy. And obviously when he can start, you know, hiking and things like that, like I'll instill that too to him. Like, take care of your body as much as possible, if that's something he chooses to do, obviously. But, you know, I think it was important for me to get on here and share my story and just to help people understand, like, social media only tells one side of the story. We look at people and we go, oh my God, like their life, you know, may be perfect. No, my life's not perfect. And I don't ever subscribe to that. Like, the people who know me, or if you ask me a question, I always say, like, there's so much stuff going on with their life. But, you know, we all have things happening. Like, people all have lives. We all have stuff going on. But the one thing you can protect is you can protect your family and you can protect yourself. And it's some of the biggest and most valuable lessons I've learned through all of this is, like, your friends can be amazing. And your family really can be amazing. And just take care of yourself. Put yourself first. Put your family first. Advocate for yourself. It's like a continuous thing, I feel like, on this podcast, that women continue to tell their stories, or men tell their stories, and say, advocate for yourself. If you feel like something's off, definitely do that. And for anybody dealing with the symptoms of a Prolactinoma, I think it's just so important that you get your MRI done by a neuroendocrinologist. They have to be ran a certain way because it's just so easy to miss them. And before I had gone in surgery, my prolactin had dropped down into the 40s, but it was really supposed to be at 7. That's my baseline. So my prolactin was still 5 times the amount that it was supposed to be. And I think now it's kind of went up to 12, 13, and it's just staying there. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy listening to my life and getting a little glimpse into it. And, you know, I'm just very grateful. I just feel really thankful. Like, we go through things in our life, we push through, and, you know, there's people I haven't talked to in years that I talk to now. Like, my appreciation for women is just like, I just think they're so amazing. Mothers and women in general, like people who want to become mothers, like, we're so strong. And so I think we have to continue just to speak up, advocate for ourselves, and recognize our strength and understand, like, we all cry. We have things that are going on. We feel overwhelmed at days, but that doesn't mean you're a bad mom. And it doesn't mean other people don't feel that way. Like, people do feel that way. I have days where I still cry and I'm overwhelmed and we have 1,000 things going on, but, you know, we all feel that way at times. It just doesn't speak to how you are as a mother itself. Like, we just have bad days. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I think it's been and continues to be an avenue for us to share really real stories. Not all bad, some good, lots good. And I think what we're learning is, like, you really can persevere through anything, and family is everything. Thanks again for listening to another episode of Moms on the Mic with Mariah. We will see you all back here again next Monday. Go ahead and follow us on Spotify, Apple, and any major podcast platforms. On Apple Podcasts, rate and review us. Follow us on IG, YouTube, and TikTok at Moms on the Mic with Mariah. And let me know what issues you guys would like to hear on the podcast and any feedback. And also, if you'd like to come on and tell your story, go ahead and throw me a DM. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys next Monday. Another story from another lovely person. See ya.